Hello and welcome to the Overly Animated Podcast, where we take animation seriously. We provide fan-oriented and analytic discussions on a variety of animated shows, movies, and anime, including Steven Universe, Gravity Falls, Star Wars Rebels, and Moonbeam City and Ruby. I'm Dylan Hysen, and today I'll be taking you solo, recapping and reviewing the latest episode of Star Wars Rebels. Always two there are. The third episode of the second season of Star Wars Rebels, depending on whether you include the Siege of Lothal movie or not. We cover the shows I mentioned before every week, including Star Wars Rebels at overlyanimated.com and our YouTube channel at Overly Animated Podcast, where I know a lot of you are listening. So we're gonna get right into, or I'm gonna get right into the latest episode. Always two there are. Starting off, probably a pretty strong title here. Nice Yoda quote, pretty representative of the point of the episode. With I guess it's like a dual meaning episode title name. With the first thing I think of with always two. It's the two Inquisitors. That's kind of the focal point of this episode and the most notable thing about it. However, when Yoda says this quote, he's referring to a master and an apprentice, right? So that's the episode is kind of framed within the context, much like this entire series of talking of the context of Ezra and Kanan and their master apprentice relationship. It's not a super significant frame. Like, it just happens kind of in the beginning and the end, and then Kanan's absent the entire time. They talk about it a little bit with one of the Inquisitors, kind of like, why are you with him? You should be training with me. And it's mentioned and a little bit Ezra's Jedi abilities kind of tested, and that relates to his relationship as well. It's not the strongest connecting thread, I would say. However, definitely good enough to get a Yoda title in as the title of the episode, even if it is from episode 1, I think. Always two there are. This was a strong-ish episode of the show. It was not a lot. I think not a lot happened, and not a lot significant plotty happened. This is the introduction of these two Inquisitors. Like I said, we talk a little bit about Ezra and Kanan's relationship, but not that much. Really, this is kind of a setup episode, I assume, for where the season is going. However, it doesn't do anything super notable as a setup episode, in my opinion. It's kind of quiet the whole time. I don't think there's many good comedic beats. And in terms of character moments, I guess Zeb is the most significant, it turns out, being this episode for Zeb's character, which is nice because it's been a while, I think, since we've really had a Zeb-centric episode on the show. I think I've kind of talked about this before. I think Zeb is one of the more developed characters of the crew of the Ghost, in spite of the fact that he really hasn't been the focal point of an episode since early season 1. However, I think that early season 1 really was really into Zeb's development for some reason. He was the focal point of a few episodes there, and now he's back to the spotlight here at the end of the episode. I don't know if this episode does much interesting with Zeb's character other than like affirm to himself that he can do things without the crew of the Ghost, which is kind of an interesting take on Zeb's character. Like he's the strongest one of the group. He's the tank of the party, if you will, and it's interesting to think of him as having not a lot of confidence in order to get that he could get tasks done on his own and save the other members of his crew. So I think that was kind of a nice little nuance to Zeb's character that we hadn't really seen before. And I like giving, Zeb, who's normally super confident and kind of seems like he's always cocky, and even if he's not, he doesn't think he's the best. He generally seems like he's in charge of the situation and is very aware of like that he's big and intimidating, and I like giving him this kind of nuanced, motivation that he has some doubts about whether he can get things done without the rest of the crew. Now that I think about it, this might be a connecting theme throughout season 2. It's possible that they're making a conscientious effort to give our characters of our crew of the Ghost subtle flaws in ways that we haven't seen in season 1 of this show, because one of my favorite things about the first 2 episodes of season 1, again, discounting Siege of Lothal, the 2 episodes before this one, was that Kanan kind of didn't appear great for some of the episode, because he had this prejudice against clones. And I thought this was a really interesting nuance to Kanan's character we hadn't seen before in season 1. He was really just this kind of can do it all, this holy figure, because we're seeing the series through Ezra's eyes to a certain extent, so it makes sense that he'd see Kanan as kind of infallible. But in the last 2 episodes, we saw some major flaws from Kanan, and they're rectified a little bit in this episode. He's kind of back to being he's interacting with Rex and stuff, and it doesn't seem like he retains that flaw. However, Rex says he lacks discipline, so that's another kind of nuance for Kanan's character. Rex is like, I can teach Ezra discipline, and you cannot, and also you're undisciplined, and I'm going to apparently teach you that through this game of whatever they're playing. So I like continuing to, stick some forks into the balloon that is, that's a weird metaphor, that is Kanan's perfect character, and I think we're doing that here a little bit too for pop some holes, I guess. No, never mind. I think we're doing that a little bit here for Zeb too. It's not that Zeb. I feel like Zeb was not the character that it was most in need of flaws, because I think from the audience's perspective, he's flawed. Maybe it's just me, but he's silly. He doesn't. He seems immature. He's always playing with Ezra and stuff. So I feel like he does have that for his character, but I also like adding this nuance as well. And I wouldn't be surprised now if we do this. We hit home for all of our characters, all of our major characters on the Ghost. But I think this kind of brings up my common gripe about this show, the way they frame this show, and I think this episode highlights it a little bit. Zeb and Kanan, I think, were 2 of the developed characters here in our series, and I think that you can kind of introduce flaws for them, and it works, and it's cool because it's cool. It's satisfying from a audience intellectual perspective, because they've kind of been built up, and we know a lot about them, and we know about their motivations and what their characters are doing. And I think it works for Ezra too. Ezra's just such a common force in the show, though, that he has a lot of flaws. We know what his flaws are. We also know what his strengths are, I guess. So I feel like these are more of the side main characters that we're gonna spotlight here. But after Zeb and Kanan, where do you go from here? Well, Chopper's not really a character. I mean, he's a little bit of a character, and we do some interesting Chopper things here, which I want to talk about, but in this episode. But the next 2 are Hera and Sabine, and it's I don't think either are as developed as Kanan or Zeb, and it's disappointing here, because this episode features Sabine in a major role. Here we take Ezra, Zeb, and Sabine, and we don't really get much from her. She's kind of innovative with how she handles situations. She's the one that takes charge with the engineering type things, but what else makes up her character? I don't know. What does this episode do for Sabine other than that she's there? I mean, I like that she's there, but it's a little bit annoying to continue to feature her without really digging into any sort of depth with her character. They only really did it once in season 1 with the episode with the ambassador or the senator, and we learned that she was in school, and that didn't work for her and stuff like that. But we don't know much about her motivations beyond that, and it's a continuing, I think, struggle for this show. Maybe second only to a bigger problem that Hera has almost no background, motivations, character, almost anything. I actually think this might be less of a problem than Sabine, because the show doesn't try to do things with Hera. Hera, like, does stuff on the show, but it's not clear that we're supposed to care too much about her. I think we care about how she interacts with other characters, which is important. And this episode did actually do something for her, because we had one of the most intimate moments between Hera and Kanan at the end of the episode. They kind of have physical contact in a way which we hadn't really seen before. Hera and Kanan always kind of implied to have the parents of the ghost always kind of implied to have a I don't know. Is it implied to have a romantic relationship? I think probably a sexual one at least, and it's not really clear to what extent. We've gotten the impression that Kanan is very affected by Hera before. However, this is kind of one of the moments where they appear most romantically linked, I think. And it's that was an interesting characterization of the two, especially in the context of fear for what's to come, concern for their crew of their ship, and what they're going to have to face from the Empire in the future. And I think that was a nice moment at the end, and I'd love to see more of Kanan and Hera, and hopefully use that in a way to develop Hera's character at all. So I like what the season has done character-wise for the show, motivations with introducing these kind of subtle flaws for our main cast. But I think now we're going to run into the wall of what do we do when half of our main cast is not fully developed? How do we introduce flaws into that? I think that they can just develop, and I think that would work. And I think the show, this isn't like a major flaw of the show. Maybe it seems like I'm just criticizing. This is just like my first thought in terms of. Also, this was in the context of a major praising of the show too. Just my first thought of like what I'd like to see improved from the show right now, and I think Sabine and Hera focused episodes, and not just like them in the main roles, because we had an episode in season 1 where they were just like fighting and stuff, and that didn't do what I want. That's not doing what I'm saying. It's not like do what I say. It's not doing what I'm arguing for. That's just featuring them in an episode, which is good. I would like to feature all the characters kind of more equal time, but that's not delving into their characters in any sort of depth. So I think that's what maybe I'm hoping for the next couple episodes. And this all in the context kind of the different role that this show has in season 2. So season 1 was just so centric on the ghost and our main cast, and now we're in a whole new world. We have a larger rebellion to think about. We reference Commander Sato here. We have Ahsoka. I don't think Ahsoka's actually on screen here. However, she is referenced several times, and we kind of all the actions of the crew of the Ghost is within the larger context of this rebellion now, and I'm worried that the spotlight's going to move too much away from our main cast and onto these side characters. Even Ahsoka, who seems to be a main character now, and I'm not sure, is someone who was kind of thrust into the series, from a different series, and I'm less inclined to care about her in the context of this series because she hasn't been really developed on the screen of on Star Wars Rebels. So I'm really worried about the focus moving away from the main crew of the Ghost. Season 1, I think, had a really intimate feel to it, and that was very appealing. Once you move away from your core cast and try to expand your world, I mean, obviously the show is in the context of one of the biggest, fictional mythologies of all time. So it's in a unique situation where you have to deal with this at some point. You're going to have to expand beyond your core unit. But even so, it's still a big danger in terms of ruining your main dynamics of the show. It's like I think the biggest comparison that I can make of this of Star Wars Rebels is to Firefly. I mean, it's very similar context of crews of a ship and in space, and a lot of the characters have very similar roles to Firefly. And it's like, if we take the main cast of Firefly, if there, if there was a season 2 of Firefly, I would we would all be very happy. But if there was, and then they like introduced the crew there in the context of some larger mythology, and you take away these great dynamics between the characters. I mean, I'm just saying what I said again for this, but try to imagine that type of thing. And I feel like that would be unsuccessful in a way in which I'm worried that this season might get it to a point of. That being said, it hasn't done that so far. Ahsoka wasn't even in this episode. Rex was, though. So Rex, however, took on kind of an auxiliary role. It's like you had characters in season 1 that were there, but it doesn't mean that they were, soaking up precious time spent on other characters in the show. So I think Rex's function in this episode was fine. And in fact, I actually think it was very good. Like I said, bringing subtle development to Kanan and Kanan's relationship with Ezra, as I mentioned earlier. So yeah, this is kind of just a hypothetical fear that I don't think the show has actually fallen into. This episode, if it has problems, it's not related to that. It is maybe related to just featuring Sabine and not doing anything with her. Also, Ezra, it's fine when Ezra doesn't have any like major changes or focus or anything like that. It's fine if it's just him learning his Jedi stuff. He has, we reinforce his loyalty here. It seems like he's developing mentally, like mental toughness wise, like he resists the interrogation pretty well. And that's kind of maybe something new for him, I guess. I don't know. So I think Ezra's function here was fine, and I like Zeb at the end. But just overall, I think basically this episode, like the first half before the Inquisitors came, was kind of slow. And the second half was, it's not the grade A Inquisitor material we've had from the show before. So let's talk about these Inquisitors, because that's kind of the main thing. I've babbled for 17 minutes without, discussing our 2 new characters. Let's talk about Fifth Brother and Seventh Sister. I don't know if they've definitely not had those names within the context of the show. So that's usually I'm hesitant to venture outside of the realm of show canon, but I guess these are their names. So let's talk about them. Philip Anthony Rodriguez as the Fifth Brother. We saw him introduced last week, and his voice is, I think, very good for this role. It's very kind of menacing and creepy, and here his function is not explored that much. He kind of rebels away from the rest of the Empire forces that we see. There's that very like quick scene of him saying, screw you, Agent Callus, I'm gonna go do this on my own. And I don't blame him. I don't need to see more Agent Callus. I've talked about this before, but he seems very independent, which is, I guess, interesting to thrust him into the context of Seventh Sister here, too. I don't have a lot to say about his character. We haven't done much with him. He's just kind of this creepy force, and he seems pretty threatening. He kind of reverses the bombs on Sabine and Zeb, which is kind of one of the biggest, maneuvers by the 2 Inquisitors this week. He seems pretty capable, although they did escape from him and Seventh Sister at the end, and it seemed like it was more of his fault. I'm not sure. I'd need to rewatch that. Like, he goes to deflect the incoming shots instead of holding the ship, and I guess that was needed, though, so I guess you could argue it either way. Their dynamic is more notable than anything specifically involving his character, and we'll see more in the future. So let's talk about Seventh Sister. This is the first time we see her. She's voiced by Sarah Michelle Gellar, which is very exciting. But I hear her voice is very distorted in this character, and that was kind of the most striking thing about her. I don't know if that was successful or not yet. I need to see more. It was certainly interesting, but I couldn't help but think for a little bit of the episode while she was talking, oh, this is just, Sarah Michelle Gellar speaking into like a Darth Vader, those Darth Vader voice box mask type things. That's too, like, I don't know if it was that well done. I mean, it was fine. Yeah, I don't know. I just couldn't help but think that, because when you take someone who we know, like a prominent actor, and then you do that type of effect with them, I feel like that's inevitable, that thought. And that pulled me out of the episode a little bit. So, to be determined on that, but I'm weary. That being said, her character model was very interesting. She had her visor or whatever down for most of the episode, and I was wondering when she had it down whether her voice was just coming through like a thing in her helmet or mask or whatever it was, and turns out no, she just talks like that even when her face is exposed to us. She has I don't know how to describe her. We didn't see her for that long. She's these striking yellow eyes and this weird skin color, and I'm sure she's a race of something that I'm not aware of because I'm not the most well versed in the overall Star Wars mythology. But I liked what we saw from her. Interesting characterization within the 5 minutes we saw. She is interested in Ezra. She wants to train Ezra. She also calls Ezra pretty, I think. I'm pretty sure that happened. That was very weird. Like, what's going on here? I don't know what to make of her. She kind of bosses fifth brother around a little bit, and it seems like, at least from my perspective watching that, I'm like, okay, I mean, as much as you want to, try to take the perspective of the villains, it seemed to me like it was more unreasonable for his position than hers. It's like, okay, you're both there, just work together now. And fifth brother just wanted to do whatever on his own, but eventually he does take his side of the thing and then captures them, and then they work together at the end. So it's interesting that they both randomly show up. It does. Another thing is that they both seem subordinate to Jason Isaacs' Inquisitor from season 1, which I do not think was established before. He was the Grand Inquisitor apparently, and that's an interesting dynamic. So I guess since he was the big bad the big bad Inquisitor, we need two of them now in order to seem any sort of threatening. So I think both of them, I'm optimistic for their functions as the two villains here, especially Seven Sister. I'm not like sold that she's like great, but I'm thinking a lot about her character, so that's a good sign. I don't know if it's in a positive light, but what a weird thing she had going on with Ezra there. I'm not sure what to make of that, but yeah, so they are coming from different places. I like that dynamic. It's kind of interesting, like these like unwillingly cooperating villains and what presence they'll take against our leads. So we'll see more of them. In terms of this episode functioning as an introduction to them, it was all right. I think it was it did more than Jason Isaacs' introduction, I guess. His character was never, super. His Jason Isaacs' whole thing was that, the voice of the Grand Inquisitor, his whole thing was that he was menacing. And actually, this episode does do a lot more to establish these two as people than the Grand Inquisitor, so that's a positive. That being said, I never needed Jason Isaacs' Inquisitor to be more than just intimidating because he was so good at it, and that character model is really good, and I loved his function within the episodes that he was in. So I them to a certain extent, trying to make these two slightly larger characters and presences than the Grand Inquisitor is a risk. Like I'm slightly underwhelmed by their function this episode because they tried to have a larger function. That's a little weird, but I think that's a fair point. So maybe the pressure's on the show to do more with them now that they have started to do more. I'm interested to see what they can do with a stronger villain presence with like Jason Isaacs was never the only one there in season 1. There are a lot of varying Empire presences, so if it's just those two as the main one, Callus is never going to be the main force, so we'll see what other kind of presences. I assume we won't see Vader again. Not that I don't like Darth Vader, obviously, but I prefer him sitting on the sidelines for this show because it takes the air out of the sails in terms of what's going on, except for Vader. Like, he hogs it's like you can't help but focus on him when he's there. I talked about that more on last week's podcast. So yeah, I'm interested to see what we do more with them. What other specifics have we? I think we talked about the major things I wanted to talk about. This was in the context of getting medical supplies. This is the type of kind of dumb mission this show goes on. We had the return of Commander Meiluran there. That was a nice little callback to season 1. If Meiluran is a known fruit, Why is this tricking them? Okay, that's, maybe it's a large galaxy, I guess. So not everyone knows Meilurons. Maybe someone's name could be Meiluron, like Commander Apple or something. I don't know. Zeb surprisingly competent in this episode, like way more than we'd seen before. He successfully tricks them very easily. Yeah, I'm worried a little bit about the two Inquisitors being super, like not easy to trick. I don't know how to phrase that, but they seem fairly manipulated by our main crew. Although Ezra can't worm his way out of his interrogation. So they know about Ahsoka. That's interesting. They're gonna go tell him we have the thing at the end. They have to report to Commander Sato. They had the new droid. What was that droid called? It was I don't know if it was new, but it's very prominent here. It seemed kind of threatening. It easily takes out Chopper and stuff. There's like always two types of droids on the show: the ones that are just completely not a factor, and then ones that are surprisingly can do stuff. Though they had the one from episode 1 of this season, which seems like the most interesting type. So yeah, I think that about covers most things here. I'm still reading through my show notes, looking for more things I missed. Yeah, I think that's good. So overall, I was, moderately positive on this episode. Actually, I recently got asked on my Tumblr, dylanova.tumblr.com, which is a good place to contact me if you want to ask questions about my opinions on stuff, to rank the Rebels episodes so far. And this is a thing I do with everything. I just make a lot of lists, and especially episode lists. And so I broke the episodes down into 3 tiers: very good, good, and decent. I think the show has no bad episodes, so decent is as low as it goes, which is the big strength of the show. But I also think the show doesn't really have any amazing episodes. There would be a tier above very good, and which is fine. There haven't been that many yet. So I have a bunch of I have the 2 movies in the very good tier. I have the finale from last season. I have episode 3, episode 4, the Lando Calrissian episode, and the Path of the Jedi one, which is one of my favorites. The one with Yoda, holographic Yoda, I think. And then we have good and decent. I think this one would be low on good, right? I think that's where I would put it. Interestingly, I have Relics of the Old Republic at number 10 in my good tier. I guess this is worse than the last episode. Yeah, it has to be, because it didn't do a lot to excite me, whereas last episode I had a lot of praise for. So I guess I'll put this slightly below Relics of the Old Republic. We're not off to we don't have any episodes that have stood out to me so far this season. However, I think it's a pretty solid start, and I'm very interested to see where they go with the Inquisitors, and I have the direction we've gone with the characters here. So looking forward to next week's. I guess I can briefly mention next week's episode, what we've got. There's a preview at the end, and we had that weird looking guy from the Lando Calrissian episode, and then there's some new pirate, which, if it's a returning character, I did not recognize him. They're returning from the universe. Brothers of the Broken Horn will be airing on November 4th, and I'll cover it that night as usual. At some point I will have a co-host, and it won't be just me, but maybe not next week, maybe eventually. There are 22 episodes of the season, apparently, so there's a lot to go. So let me know what you thought of this podcast and this episode. If you're watching on the YouTube video, you can leave a comment and I will respond to it and see it. By the way, if you're wondering why there's so many views hopefully on this one, there was on the last one, it's because I tagged it Star Wars, and apparently that just instantly got me way more views than the rest of the podcast. So, it's not a dishonest tag. This is a Star Wars, tagged thing, So, let me know any feedback, or my social media links, which I gave out Tumblr before. The rest are on overlyanimated.com. I've been writing some blogs. You can check those out there too on general animation. We cover 5 regular animation shows right now, in addition to, not for a while, but movies and animated movies and stuff like that. So check it out there. You can support us at patreon.com/overlyanimated. Thanks to our current patrons, Shayna, Mitch, Cordell, Beatrice, and Nate, Andy, and Jamie, aka Hannah, Fever, Mitch, Cordell, University, Beatrix Exchange, Buzz Lightyear, and Mailman. And I really appreciate all of your support on our Patreon, and you can check that out there. So I'll be back next week covering next week's episode. Let me know what you thought. I guess that's good. So thanks for listening, guys, and I'll see you next time. Bye.